This is my little farming game called Tiny Terraces, where you have some little fellas that take care of your farm. I'm currently about a year into development. I showed the first 3 weeks in the last video, and here's some more progress. I drew this little sign, threw it in, and made it display the plant type that's growing in the row above. I created this little piece of code so that I could spawn particles at different positions using a single particle system, such as on building placement, and made some bouncy walls with this code. Looks somewhat decent when combined. I created a class of plants that I call producers. They are plants that don't get fully harvested but keep producing their goods. Berries are one of those. They started out by just constantly dropping berries every some amount of seconds, but I later changed them to only create a berry when harvested, which would send them back to a previous growth stage. Visually it didn't function, but internally it did. It may not function properly, but at least the game looks good. I did get it to work, so you can see it resets to the flowering stage upon harvest of the plant. I also made this little gate, which would open for the fellows when they were near. Another decorative object I made was a wooden fence, and I made some upgraded versions of the beehives. Here they are, surrounded by some plants. The idea with the hives was that there would be more bees in each hive level, which would allow them to gather more pollen, which means more honey and more money. Here's that fence I made. Looks good. Also go wishlist Tiny Terraces on Steam. It will be releasing at the end of July. I drew several more plants, some green onions and ginger, some romaine lettuce, and a habanero pepper. At this point, the Steam page had been up for 2 weeks and had surpassed 500 wishlists, which, as I had promised in a short, meant that it was time to add chickens and ducks. Chicken! I was trying to figure out the sizing in comparison to the fellas, and ended up with some big ol' birds. Made this beautiful walking duck animation and a baby version, plus a walking animation for the chicken, and now the whole squad was grooving. I drew some flowers. They looked quite nice. I wanted to have some more interaction with the game, so I added the ability to pick up the animals. Made sure their shadow followed them, and it functioned well. Since the new animals were added and the game was becoming more popular, I wanted to redo the capsule art. This was a mock-up, which turned into this. I think it looks better than the previous one. I made a little 3-frame animation for the butterflies, which looks pretty nice. Added a visual and particle that would show the pollen on a bee that is currently holding pollen. They were obviously functioning well. Now they fly over to the plant, collect their non-existent pollen on the legs, and fly back home. I wanted to expand a little more on the animals past being a visual thing, so I made them a coop, as well as eggs for them to lay, a little feeding thing, and a pile of feed. Made them be able to lay the eggs. I mean, they were just printing those things out, and made it so that they would start as babies and would grow up by eating these bugs. I also added the ability to assign them to a coop by dragging them on top of it. After that, I created this crow. This was part of an idea for the overall gameplay. I wanted something to stop people from being able to soft lock themselves on seeds. So the crows would fly in, and they would have a chance to leave the player a seed upon leaving. Made some more flowers, and because of making these flowers, I altered the way seeds work. So if I ever wanted to add a plant variation to a seed, I can just drag it into this list, which makes the seed be able to grow into any of those variations. I created a frog, made this animation, which was alright, but I spent a few more minutes and got this better version. Also drew some particles, as I wanted there to be weather in the game, so we got rain and a frog. I spent some time making the frog script. It had adjustable jump height, length, and timing. Added this little frog statue and a sound effect on hop. There wasn't a reason anybody would play the game for longer than a few minutes, so I added some progression stuff. It would display what it wanted and the rewards you would gain from completing it. I then made this thing, which would be the spot that the rewards popped in from, almost correct, and got this, which was a good enough start. After that, I created a new version of that very old apple tree, refined it a little bit, and ended up with this. Made a coffee and tea plant, which looked quite nice watching the fellas carry the beans around. This was a thing that happened while I was trying to create a system that would spawn randomly colored butterflies. The void consumes all. Then I got this. Not that there will be this many butterflies, but they will exist. These butterflies would come into your farm, and they are tied to the amount of planted crops. I added an additional 4 plants, which look quite nice, and I drew some button icons for the sidebar. Since these fellas were not people, I needed a way for them to be created, so I started on this machine. It allows for swapping between types of fellas to create, and because they aren't people, I made some gears that would fill the other slot of the creator. This was attempt 1, and here was the redo, since I didn't like that version. I put it into the game, got this, where you would lock in the type of person to make, and they would bring the required parts, and then out slides a new fella. That covers an additional month of the game's development. Please wishlist Tiny Terraces on Steam. It'll be releasing at the end of July.